The sun was rising over a lonely airstrip on a small Pacific island when a squad of U.S. Marines approached the twisted remnants of what had once been a Japanese forward base. The year was 1943. The jungle had already begun to reclaim the airfield. Vines creeping across runways, the air thick with the scent of rust and decay. As the Marines moved cautiously through the silence, one of them stopped, staring ahead. There, sitting alone at the edge of the cracked tarmac, was something none of them expected. A perfectly intact Japanese Zero fighter. Its pale green fuselage glinted faintly in the morning light, its red rising sun insignia faded but unmistakable. The plane looked as if it could take off at any moment. No bulitoles, no signs of fire, just abandoned. Sergeant Thomas Red Miller was the first to approach. "No traps," he whispered, scanning for wires or hidden charges. None were found. The cockpit canopy was half open, the pilot's seat still in place. A faint smell of fuel lingered, a ghostly reminder that the plane had once lived, roared, and fought. The Marines circled the aircraft in awe. For months, the Zero had been a nightmare. Fast, agile, and untouchable. American pilots had watched their own planes fall one after another against the enemy's superior maneuverability. Yet here it was, the legendary fighter, motionless and silent, as if its spirit had fled. A mechanic named Corporal Harris climbed up and peered inside the cockpit. "Looks brand new," he muttered. The gauges were labeled in Japanese, the flight stick worn smooth from use. He noticed the thin metal panels, the almost fragile framework. "You kidding me? This thing's paper thin." That discovery sent shock through the ranks. The Marines had assumed Japanese technology was equal or superior. After all, the Zero had dominated the skies early in the war. But standing this close, they realized its terrible secret. There was no armor plating around the cockpit. The fuel tanks weren't self-sealing. The pilot had no real protection at all. The aircraft's speed and range came from stripping away every ounce of weight, even safety itself. As the Marines documented the find, word reached the engineers and intelligence officers back at headquarters. This was the first time an almost undamaged Zero had been captured. They called it a miracle, a priceless window into Japan's aviation design. The fighter was carefully dismantled, packed up, and shipped to a secure testing site. Back in the States, engineers and pilots pored over the machine like archaeologists uncovering a lost civilization. The secrets hidden beneath its smooth metal skin would soon change everything. For the first time, Americans understood the philosophy behind Japan's most feared weapon: agility through vulnerability, dominance through risk. Sergeant Miller would later recall that moment in his diary. "We found her sitting there like a ghost," he wrote. "Beautiful, deadly, and fragile, just like the empire she fought for." That silent Zero on the forgotten airfield became a symbol of pride, of desperation, and of a turning point in the Pacific War. What had once haunted American pilots from the clouds was now laid bare on the ground, stripped of its mystery. The ghost that once ruled the skies had been found, and soon it would help destroy the very war machine that built it. The Pacific sun had barely risen when the Marines at Guadalcanal stumbled upon something that didn't belong. A sleek, metallic shape lying half-hidden among the jungle palms near a broken airstrip. It was silent, ghostly, and almost perfect. The wings bore the red circle of Japan, but the plane was different from anything they had ever seen before. Its paint shimmered faintly, its design impossibly light. Someone whispered, almost reverently, "That's a Zero." For months, the Zero fighter had haunted the skies above the Pacific. Japanese pilots, flying these machines, seemed untouchable, diving, twisting, and vanishing before American aircraft could even line up a shot. Stories spread among Allied troops about ghost planes that could outmaneuver anything, defy physics, and strike without warning. To the Marines and pilots, the Zero wasn't just a machine, it was a legend, almost supernatural in its deadliness. But now, one of those ghosts had fallen to Earth. And for the first time, the Americans could see it up close. The airframe was riddled with bullet holes, the cockpit cracked open like a wound. But what shocked the engineers wasn't the damage, it was the design. The fuselage was so thin, they could almost see light through it. The armor was practically non-existent. No steel plating around the pilot. No self-sealing fuel tanks. It was as if the Japanese had traded safety for speed. When the engineers reported their findings to command, disbelief spread through the ranks. How could such a fragile machine dominate the skies? The answer came from captured Japanese documents and pilot reports. The Zero was designed with one principle: absolute performance. It wasn't meant to survive hits. It was meant to never be hit. The pilots were trained to perfection, their aircraft stripped of every unnecessary gram of weight, turning combat into a dance of precision and risk. Word spread quickly among American pilots. The once invincible Zero suddenly had weaknesses. Hit them hard and fast. One Navy officer briefed his squadron, pointing to the diagram of the newly studied plane. They're fast in turns but fragile in dives. Don't dogfight, dive and fire. Slowly, the tide began to turn. In the skies above the Solomon Islands and the Coral Sea, new tactics were born from that wrecked fighter. American pilots learned to exploit the Zero's limits, using altitude and power instead of agility. The myth of invincibility began to crumble. But even as American engineers developed new aircraft, the Hellcat, the Corsair, they couldn't help but respect what they had seen. The Zero was a masterpiece of design, a weapon born from a nation's obsession with perfection and sacrifice. It told a story not just of war, but of culture, of pilots willing to die in machines built for beauty and speed, not protection. Years later, when veterans spoke of the Zero, their voices carried a strange mix of awe and sadness. It was the deadliest thing in the sky, one said, and the most fragile. Another added quietly, they built it to win, not to survive. And so, the legend of the Zero lived on, not as an unbeatable enemy, but as a haunting reminder of how far human ambition can go when victory matters more than life itself. In the Pacific winds, some still say you can hear it, the whisper of a fragile giant that once ruled the skies. It was August 1942, and the humid air of Guadalcanal buzzed with the sound of insects and distant gunfire. The U.S. Marines had been battling the Japanese for weeks, holding the newly captured airfield that would later be named Henderson Field. Every night, Japanese planes screamed down from the dark sky, dropping bombs and vanishing before anyone could react. The men called them Washing Machine Charlie, a ghostly enemy they couldn't see clearly, only hear. But one morning, as the mist lifted over the jungle, a patrol stumbled upon something they never expected. Lying at the edge of the dense palms, half buried in the mud, was a Japanese Zero fighter, almost completely intact. Its propeller was bent, its canopy cracked, but the rest looked eerily untouched. The Marines stood frozen, staring at it. "We got one," whispered Sergeant Miller. "A real one." Up to that moment, no one in the American forces had ever captured a Zero in such condition. Every previous encounter ended with the plane exploding in midair or vanishing into the ocean. This was different. This was a miracle. Word raced back to headquarters, and soon engineers, intelligence officers, and pilots gathered around the mysterious machine. When they began examining it, the first thing they noticed was its weight, or rather, its lack of it. The fuselage was incredibly light, almost delicate. One mechanic knocked on the side and blinked. "Feels like tin," he muttered. There was no armor plating, no bulletproof glass, no self-sealing fuel tanks. The Japanese had built this plane for speed and maneuverability, sacrificing protection entirely. The discovery shocked everyone. For months, Allied pilots had been terrified of the Zero, convinced it was some kind of technological marvel, faster, stronger, and deadlier than anything in the American arsenal. Yet here it was, a fragile bird built on the edge of destruction. The secret was not invulnerability, but precision. It could outturn any Allied fighter, but only if flown with perfect skill and absolute nerve. As the engineers continued their inspection, they found Japanese writing on the instrument panels and small hand-painted markings from the factory. Human touches that made the enemy's creation seem almost personal. One officer whispered, "They built these with their hearts, not just their hands." Within days, the plane was disassembled and shipped to Pearl Harbor for testing. American pilots flew the restored Zero and quickly realized its strengths and its fatal flaws. It could roll and climb beautifully, but in a dive, it shuddered, nearly tearing itself apart. Once its advantage of surprise was gone, it could be beaten. This single discovery, an accident of war, a crashed plane found in the mud, changed the balance of the Pacific Air War. New American tactics were born overnight. Pilots were told to never dogfight a Zero, to attack in a dive and pull away using superior engine power. And it worked. From that day on, the Zero was no longer an unstoppable phantom. It was still deadly, yes, but no longer invincible. What had once been a symbol of terror became a puzzle, solved by grit, luck, and curiosity. When the story spread through the ranks, soldiers began to speak of the Guadalcanal Zero as if it were a ghost that had turned traitor, revealing its secrets to the enemy. For those who found it, the memory never faded. The glint of metal in the morning sun, the strange beauty of the machine, and the realization that even legends could bleed. In the end, the shocking discovery wasn't just about a plane. It was about the moment when mystery turned into understanding, when fear gave way to knowledge. And from that knowledge, victory began to take shape in the endless blue skies of the Pacific. When Amina was a child, she struggled with reading. Words on a page seemed like a puzzle she could never solve, and while other kids raced through books, she lagged behind. Teachers often overlooked her, assuming she simply wasn't trying hard enough. Her confidence crumbled, and for a long time, she believed she would never be able to succeed in school. But one day, everything changed. A new teacher noticed Amina's struggle and introduced her to audiobooks. For the first time, she could hear stories instead of wrestling with words. Slowly, Amina realized that her mind worked differently, not worse. Listening to stories helped her understand context, emotions, and ideas, even when reading the text was challenging. Instead of avoiding reading, she embraced her strength. Listening. She began recording herself reading aloud, practicing pronunciation, and gradually reading small passages. Her confidence grew. By high school, Amina was no longer the girl who struggled silently. She became the student who could summarize complex texts, present ideas confidently, and inspire classmates who faced their own challenges. Her weakness, her difficulty with reading, became the foundation for her strength. It taught her patience, empathy, and creative ways to learn. Today, Amina works as an educator helping children with learning difficulties. She often tells them, "Your challenges can guide you to discover strengths you never imagined." Her story is a reminder that what seems like a limitation can become a powerful advantage if approached with patience, creativity, and determination. Amina's journey proves that turning weakness into strength is not just about overcoming an obstacle. It's about discovering a new way to grow. In a small town near the mountains, there lived a young pilot named Karim. Since childhood, he dreamed of flying. His room was filled with model airplanes, and every evening, he watched planes soar across the sunset sky, imagining himself among them. Finally, after years of study and hard work, Karim earned his pilot's license. He was ready to touch the clouds, but life, as it often does, tested his dreams. During his first solo flight in a small, vintage aircraft, a sudden engine failure forced him to make an emergency landing. The plane skidded off the runway, and though Karim survived with minor injuries, his aircraft was destroyed. The town called it a tragedy, and Karim felt like a failure. He stopped flying, haunted by the fear of what could go wrong. Months passed, and Karim's spirit remained grounded. One afternoon, while walking in the mountains, he noticed a bird with a broken wing struggling to fly. Instead of leaving it, he carefully carried the bird home and nursed it back to health. During those quiet days of care, Kareem realized something profound. Even when wings fall, life finds a way to heal and adapt. Inspired by the bird, Kareem began studying aviation safety and engine mechanics in depth, learning everything he could to prevent accidents. He volunteered at the local airfield, helping other pilots prepare for unexpected situations. Slowly, he regained confidence. 1 year later, Kareem returned to the skies, not in the same aircraft, but in a more advanced plane he had helped maintain himself. This time, he flew with a newfound respect for the fragility of life and the importance of preparation. Kareem's accident, once seen as the end of his dream, became a lesson in resilience, patience, and humility. Like the bird with a broken wing, he learned to rise again, stronger and wiser. Today, he mentors young pilots, reminding them that setbacks are not the end of flight. They are opportunities to learn and soar higher. Kareem's story teaches us that fallen wings do not signify defeat. They are lessons, guiding us toward careful planning, courage, and the understanding that true strength comes from rising after every fall.